Hey, I'm Nancy Cavey, National ERISA and Individual Disability Attorney. Welcome to Winning Isn't Easy. Before we get started, I've got to give you a legal disclaimer. This podcast isn't legal advice. The Florida Bar Association says I've got to say this. So now that I've said it, I'll tell you nothing will ever prevent me from giving you an easy to understand overview of the disability insurance world, the games that disability carriers play, and what you need to know to get the disability benefits you deserve. So off we go. Do you have chronic fatigue syndrome? Well, this episode is for you. If you don't, I think there's still some takeaways to learn from. We've talked about this disease before, but I think there's so much more to discuss, especially in relation to disability insurance claims. I decided I'd just do another episode, and we're going to talk about 4 things today. Number 1, what type of doctor does the long-term disability carrier expect you to treat with if you have chronic fatigue syndrome? 2, what are the 2 things that you should be tracking in your chronic fatigue diary to win your claim? 3, what shouldn't you track in your claim? And 4th, why you should have a CPET test if you're applying for your long-term disability benefits because of chronic fatigue syndrome. Let's take a break for a moment before we get started with this week's episode.
Have you been robbed of your peace of mind from your disability insurance carrier? You owe it to yourself to get a copy of Robbed of Your Peace of Mind, which provides you with everything you need to know about the long-term disability claim process. Request your free copy of the book at kvlaw.com today.
Welcome back to Winning Isn't Easy. Are you ready to get started? What type of doctor does the long-term disability carrier expect you to treat with if you have chronic fatigue syndrome? Now, chronic fatigue syndrome, known as CFS, can be hard to diagnose and it can be hard to treat. It can be very difficult to find a doctor who gets CVS, and that can make it harder to get the right diagnosis to begin with. And you may have to see multiple doctors before you finally get the right doctor who makes the right diagnosis. As a result, many CF sufferers are going to see lots of doctors before they get the right diagnosis and treatment. And that could be a problem, and it can play right into the disability insurance carrier's hands. The lack of diagnosis is a problem, and it can complicate any disability insurance claim. Many carriers expect that you will be diagnosed with ME/CFS, and otherwise they're going to start playing games with the claim because they'll say, there isn't a diagnosis. There's these unsubstantiated subjective type complaints. So what type of doctor does the long-term disability carrier actually expect you to treat with if you've got chronic fatigue syndrome? I'll tell you that if the diagnosis comes from a general practitioner or a family doctor, that diagnosis is going to be suspect in the view of the disability carrier's eyes, unless the doctor actually demonstrates in the medical records an understanding of the criteria for the diagnosis of CFS. And it explains the basis of the diagnosis in your medical records. Now, we know, and certainly you know by experience, that there's no specific medical specialty for ME/CFS. The diagnosis and the treatment is generally made by a neurologist, a rheumatologist, maybe an infectious medicine specialist, maybe an internist. But what's clear is that you have to treat with a medical doctor who has specialized knowledge and training in ME/CFS. So before you stop work and apply for your benefits, it's important that you're diagnosed with CFS by a specialist. And that doctor should certainly have not only a special expertise in evaluating and treating CFS patients, but if they've published papers, that's even better. Now, I'm often asked, can I treat with an integrative medicine doctor, a naturopathic doctor, or a functional medicine doctor? And I will tell you that disability carriers generally do not recognize any of these physicians as medically acceptable, and they don't give much weight to the opinion of these types of doctors. The disability carrier wants you to be diagnosed and treated with, as I said, a specialist, most likely a rheumatologist or an infectious medicine specialist who has that special interest and expertise in CFS. You should check with your local support group for a list of doctors and stay away from integrative medicine providers, functional medicine providers, and those that aren't recognized within generally the disability community, the insurance disability community, as being experts. Next, we're going to learn what you should do in tracking your chronic fatigue syndrome symptoms and how and what you should be tracking. You ready for a break?